Jake Martinez stepped off the transport ship and looked around at the massive Academy buildings. The Galactic Military Academy on Nexus Prime was bigger than anything he had ever seen. Tall spires reached toward the purple sky, and strange flying. Vehicles moved between the towers like metal birds. He whistled softly and picked up his single bag. Most of the other new students had arrived with several cases and formal escorts. Jake had just his old military duffel bag and a smile on his face. He was here to learn about galactic warfare, and he was excited to meet aliens from all over the galaxy. The first thing Jake noticed was how quiet everyone was. Groups of alien students walked in perfect lines, their backs straight and their faces serious. They wore clean uniforms without a single wrinkle. Jake looked down at his own clothes. His uniform was clean, but it looked lived in. He had never been good at making his clothes look like they just came from a store. A tall alien with 8 legs approached him. The creature looked like a giant spider, but it wore a military uniform with many colorful ribbons. Its multiple eyes focused on Jake with what seemed like disapproval. "You must be the human exchange student," the alien said. Its voice was deep and formal. "I am Commander Zethkar. I will be your strategic warfare instructor." Jake grinned and stuck out his hand. "Nice to meet you, Commander. I'm Jake Martinez from Earth's Colonial Defense Force. Thanks for having me here." Commander Zethkar stared at Jake's extended hand for a long moment. Finally, it reached out one of its front legs and touched Jake's hand briefly. The other alien students nearby made soft clicking sounds that might have been their version of gasps. "Follow me," Commander Zethkar said. "Orientation begins in 1 hour. You will need to learn our protocols quickly." As they walked through the Academy halls, Jake saw aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some looked like birds with bright feathers and sharp beaks. Others were covered in scales and had long tails. A few looked almost human, but had blue skin and extra arms. Jake nodded and smiled at everyone he passed. Most of them looked away quickly. The Galactic Military Academy has trained the finest military minds for over 300 years. Commander Zethkar explained as they walked. "We maintain the highest standards of honor, discipline, and strategic thinking. Students here represent 47 different species from across the galaxy." "That's amazing," Jake said. "I bet everyone has different ideas about how to fight. Wars should be interesting to compare notes." Commander Zethkar's many eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. "Compare notes? Young human, warfare is not a casual topic for discussion. It is a sacred duty that requires respect and careful consideration." Jake nodded. "Oh, absolutely. War is serious business. That's why it's important to learn from each other, right? Back on Earth, we study military history from all over the world. You can learn a lot from how different people solve problems." They reached a large dormitory building. Commander Zethkar showed Jake to his room, which was small but clean. The walls were metal gray, and there was a single window that looked out over the Academy grounds. "Your first class is tomorrow at dawn," Commander Zethkar said. "Strategic warfare theory. Do not be late." "Dawn? What time is dawn here?" Jake asked. 0500 hours, Commander Zethkar replied. Jake winced. "That's pretty early. But I guess military life is the same everywhere." After Commander Zethkar left, Jake unpacked his few belongings. He had brought some books about human military history, a few personal items, and his old service medals. He put a picture of his family on the small desk and sat down on the hard bed. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Jake opened it to find a young alien that looked like a dolphin walking on 2 legs. She had smooth gray skin and large, dark eyes. "Hello," she said in a musical voice. "I am Cadet Lyra. I am from the Cetacean Commonwealth. I wanted to welcome you to the Academy. Hey, thanks, Jake said. I'm Jake. Want to come in? Lyra entered the room and looked around. You travel light for a military officer. Jake laughed. Yeah, I don't need much, just the basics. Are you in the strategic warfare program too? Yes, though my people are not naturally inclined toward warfare. We prefer peaceful solutions to conflicts. I am here to learn defensive strategies. To protect our worlds. That makes sense, Jake said. Defense is just as important as offense. Maybe more important, depending on your situation. Lyra tilted her head. You speak of warfare very casually. Are humans a warrior species? Jake thought about that for a moment. Not really. We don't like war, but we're pretty good at it when we have to be. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years, so we've learned a lot about it. But we prefer peace when we can get it. You have fought wars among your own species? Lyra asked, her eyes widening. Oh yeah, lots of them. Big ones, small ones, you name it. We've pretty much tried every type of warfare you can think of. That's actually why I'm here. Earth's government thought it would be good to learn how other species handle conflicts. Lyra looked uncomfortable. Your species fights itself frequently? Not so much anymore, Jake said. We've gotten better at talking things out. But yeah, human history is full of wars. It's kind of our thing, unfortunately. The next morning, Jake arrived at his first strategic warfare class exactly on time. The classroom was huge, with seats arranged in perfect rows. About 50 alien students sat in complete silence, their backs straight, and their attention focused on Commander ZTK Jake found an empty seat and sat down. He pulled out a notebook and pen, ready to take notes. The alien students around him stared at his simple writing tools. Most of them had electronic devices that glowed softly. Today we will discuss the basic principles of honorable warfare, Commander Zethkar began. Throughout galactic history, civilized species have followed certain rules when conflicts arise. These rules ensure that wars are fought with dignity and respect for all involved. Jake raised his hand. What kind of rules? Commander Zethkar's eyes focused on him. Rules such as avoiding civilian targets, respecting surrender, and maintaining proportional responses to aggression. Oh, like the Geneva Conventions, Jake said. Yeah, we have those on Earth too. Well, we have several different versions, but the idea is the same. Several versions? Commander Zethkar asked. Sure, the original Geneva Convention, then the updated ones after the big wars. We kept adding new rules as warfare changed, like rules about chemical weapons, biological weapons, treatment of prisoners, that sort of thing. The classroom had become completely quiet. Jake looked around and saw that every alien student was staring at him with wide eyes. Chemical weapons? Lyra whispered from across the room. Yeah, we used to use poison gas and stuff like that. Pretty nasty business. That's why we made rules against it. Well, most of us follow the rules anyway. Commander Zethkar's voice was very careful when it spoke again. Human Martinez, perhaps you could tell us more about these weapons your species has developed. Jake shrugged. Sure, if you want. Though I'm not sure how much detail I should go into. Some of it's pretty heavy stuff. The alien students exchanged glances. Many of them looked worried or confused. Jake wondered if he had said something wrong, but Commander Zethkar nodded for him to continue. Well, Jake said, humans have been making weapons for as long as we've been around. Started with rocks and sticks, then moved up to metal weapons. Gunpowder, explosives, that kind of thing. The 20th century was when things really got interesting, though. Commander Zethkar raised one of its front legs. Interesting how? That's when we figured out how to make really effective weapons. Machine guns, aircraft, tanks, submarines. Then we got into chemical weapons during the First World War. After that came nuclear weapons, which were pretty much game changers. The silence in the room was now complete. Jake looked around at the shocked faces of his classmates and wondered if he should have started with something less intense. Nuclear weapons? Commander Zethkar asked quietly. Yeah, atomic bombs. We used them to end World War II. Pretty effective, but also pretty terrible. That's why most countries agreed not to use them anymore, except in extreme situations. Jake noticed that several alien students had gone pale, if that was possible for their species. Lyra was covering her mouth with her fins. Don't worry, Jake said quickly. We're much more careful with that stuff now. Most of the really dangerous weapons are just for deterrence these days. Commander Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. Then it spoke in a voice that seemed strained. Class dismissed. Human Martinez, please remain behind. As the other students filed out quietly, Jake wondered what he had done wrong. He had just been honest about human military history. Was that a problem somehow? Commander Zethkar waited until they were alone before speaking. Human Martinez, I need to see your complete military service records. All of them. Sure, Jake said. Is there a problem? That remains to be seen, Commander Zethkar replied. Report to my office after. Evening meal. We need to discuss your species' approach to warfare in much greater detail. Jake nodded and gathered his things. As he left the classroom, he passed groups of alien students talking in hushed whispers. They stopped talking when they saw him and moved away quickly. He was starting to think that maybe humans and aliens had very different ideas about what was normal in warfare. Jake spent the next few days preparing for his first major assignment. Commander Zethkar had asked him to give a presentation on human military evolution. Jake thought it would be fun to share some of Earth's military history with his new classmates. He worked late into the night, organizing his notes and preparing visual aids. Jake wanted to make sure he covered the important parts of human warfare development. He started with early human conflicts and worked his way up to modern times. Presentation was scheduled for the main lecture hall. When Jake arrived, he found that word had spread about the human student. The hall was packed with alien students from different programs. Even some instructors had come to listen. Jake set up his equipment and looked out at the audience. He saw Lyra in the front row, along with several other students from his strategic warfare class. Commander Zethkar sat in the back with other faculty members. Good morning, everyone, Jake said with a smile. I'm excited to share some human military history with you. I think you'll find it pretty interesting. He started his presentation with a slide showing early human tools. Humans have been making weapons for about 2 million years. We started with simple stone tools and wooden spears. Pretty basic stuff, but effective for hunting and early conflicts. The audience seemed relaxed at first. Jake moved through slides, showing bronze weapons, iron swords, and early armor. The alien students took notes and nodded along. The real changes started happening around 5,000 years ago, Jake continued. That's when humans began fighting organized wars with large armies. We learned to use horses, build siege weapons, and develop military formations. Jake clicked to a slide showing ancient battle formations. This is called a phalanx. Greek soldiers would line up with long spears and shields. Pretty effective against cavalry charges. The Romans improved on this with their legion formations. Professor Quill, the bird-like instructor, raised a wing. These formations seemed designed for maximum killing efficiency. Exactly, Jake said. Humans learned that organized violence was more effective than individual combat. We started thinking about war as a science, not just a fight. A few alien students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jake noticed, but continued with his presentation. Things really picked up during the medieval period. We developed better armor, crossbows, and siege engines. The invention of gunpowder changed everything, though. Suddenly, you could kill someone from a long distance with minimal training. Jake showed slides of cannons, muskets, and early firearms. Gunpowder weapons made traditional armor useless. Battles became deadlier and faster. This is when humans started thinking about tactics and strategy in more complex ways. The room was getting quieter. Jake noticed that some of the alien students were looking pale or uncomfortable. The Industrial Revolution was when human warfare really evolved, Jake said, clicking to a new slide. We learned to mass-produce weapons, build railroads to move armies quickly, and communicate over long distances with telegraphs. He showed pictures of Civil War battlefields and World War I trenches. The American Civil War was our first modern industrial war. We used rifles, artillery, and railroads to move huge armies. The casualty rates were incredible. Over 600,000 dead in just 4 years. Several alien students gasped. Lyra was covering her eyes with her fins. But that was nothing compared to the world wars, Jake continued cheerfully. World War I was the first truly global conflict. We used machine guns, poison gas, aircraft, and submarines. The death toll was around 17 million people. The room was now completely silent. Jake looked around and saw shocked faces staring back at him. The really impressive part was how quickly we learned to adapt, Jake said. We went from horse cavalry to tank warfare in just a few years. Humans are pretty good at figuring out new ways to kill each other efficiently. Professor Quill stood up suddenly. "Excuse me," she said in a shaky voice. "I need some air." She left the room quickly. Jake watched her go, confused. Should I continue?" Commander Zethkar nodded slowly. "Please proceed, Human Martinez." "Okay, well, World War II was even more intense," Jake said. "We improved on everything from the First War. Better tanks, fighter planes, submarines, and radar. We learned to coordinate massive military operations across multiple continents." Jake showed slides of bombers, aircraft carriers, and tank battles. The logistics alone were amazing. We could move millions of soldiers and tons of equipment around the world. The industrial capacity was incredible. He clicked to a slide showing a mushroom cloud. This is when we developed nuclear weapons. The Manhattan Project was probably the most successful weapons development program in human history. We went from theory to deployed weapons in just a few years. The silence in the room was deafening. Jake looked around and saw that many alien students were staring at him with what looked like horror. "The atomic bombs ended World War II pretty quickly," Jake said. "We dropped 2 on Japan, and they surrendered within a week. Very effective, though the radiation effects were pretty nasty." A student in the middle of the room stood up and left. Then another. Soon, a steady stream of alien students was walking out of the lecture hall. Jake stopped his presentation. "Am I going too fast? I can slow down if you want." Commander Zethkar. Voice was very controlled. "Continue, Human Martinez." "Well, after World War II, we entered the Cold War period," Jake said. "That's when we really got creative with weapons development. Hydrogen bombs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, chemical weapons, biological weapons." More students left the room. Jake was starting to feel confused and a little hurt. He had worked hard on this presentation. "We also developed some interesting psychological warfare techniques," Jake continued. "Propaganda, disinformation campaigns, economic warfare. Sometimes you can defeat an enemy without firing a shot." Jake showed slides of military technologies from the Cold War era. The space race was partly about military advantage. If you can put a satellite in orbit, You can put a nuclear warhead anywhere on the planet. We called it mutually assured destruction. Lyra was still in the front row, but she looked sick. Her normally gray skin had turned almost white. The modern era has been about precision and efficiency, Jake said. Smart bombs, drone warfare, cyber attacks. We can take out specific targets with minimal collateral damage. Well, when we want to, anyway. Jake clicked to his final slide, which showed a graph of human military casualties over time. The interesting thing is that warfare has actually gotten less deadly for soldiers, even though the weapons are more powerful. We've learned to use technology to reduce our own casualties while maximizing enemy losses. The lecture hall was now mostly empty. Only a few alien students remained, along with the faculty members in the back. Any questions? Jake asked, hopefully. Commander Zethkar stood up slowly. Human Martinez, in your opinion, what is the purpose of warfare? Jake thought about that for a moment. To win, I guess. To achieve your political objectives with minimal cost to your own side. War is basically problem-solving with violence. And how do humans decide when to use these weapons? Well, that depends on the situation, Jake said. We try diplomacy first, usually. But sometimes you have to fight. When you do, you want to win as quickly and efficiently as possible. Commander. Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. What about honor? What about minimizing suffering? Jake shrugged. Honor is nice, but it doesn't win wars. As for suffering, the best way to minimize it is to end the conflict quickly. The longer a war drags on, the more people die. Even civilian populations? We try to avoid civilian casualties when possible, Jake said. But sometimes it's unavoidable. In total war, everyone is part of the war effort. The remaining alien students were staring at Jake with wide eyes. Commander Zethkar's multiple eyes were focused on him with an intensity that made Jake uncomfortable. Human. Martinez, Commander Zethkar said carefully. Do you consider yourself a typical representative of your species? Jake laughed. Me? No way. I'm pretty moderate compared to most military people. I've never even been in a real war. Most of my experience is just training exercises and peacekeeping missions. The alien faculty members in the back of the room were whispering among themselves. Jake caught words like dangerous and unstable. In their conversations, are there humans who are more aggressive than you? Commander Zethkar asked. Sure, lots of them. Some of my instructors back on Earth were pretty hardcore. They'd fought in multiple wars and seen real combat. Those guys could be scary when they wanted to be. Commander Zethkar nodded slowly. I see. Class dismissed. Human Martinez, please report to my office immediately. As the remaining students filed out, Jake packed up his presentation materials. He was disappointed that so many people had left. He had thought the presentation was going pretty well. Lyra approached him as he was packing up. Jake, she said, quietly, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you really think it's normal to kill millions of people in a war? Jake paused in his packing. Normal? I wouldn't say it's normal, but it happens sometimes. War is ugly, Lyra. That's why we try to avoid it when possible. But you spoke about it so casually, like it was just statistics. Jake looked at her confused. Expression. Well, it is statistics, in a way. Military planners have to think about numbers. How many soldiers do you need? 3 days after Jake's presentation, Commander Zethkar announced that the Academy would begin its annual War Games simulation. Jake was excited about this. Finally, he would get to see how other species approached military problems in practice. Students will be divided into mixed species teams, Commander Zethkar explained to the assembled class. Each team will face a series of strategic challenges. You will be evaluated on your tactical decisions, leadership abilities, and adherence to galactic military protocols. Jake raised his hand. What kind of scenarios will we be facing? Various situations that military commanders might encounter in real conflicts, Commander Zethkar replied. Rescue operations, defensive positions, resource conflicts, and diplomatic negotiations. Jake nodded. This sounded like the training exercises he had done back on Earth, except probably with more rules and less flexibility. When the team assignments were announced, Jake found himself grouped with Lyra, a tall reptilian student named Crix, and a crystalline being called Shard. Lyra still seemed nervous around him, but she was trying to be friendly. I hope we can work well together, Lyra said as they gathered for their first team meeting. I am sure we will find a way to succeed with honor, Crix said. His voice was deep and formal. My people have a long tradition of noble warfare. Shard communicated through light patterns that flashed across its crystal body. Jake had learned to read basic Shard communication, though he wasn't very good at it yet. Shard says they are excited to learn from different strategic approaches. Jake translated. Their first scenario was loaded into the simulation chamber. The team found themselves looking at a holographic display of a fortified enemy position. On a hilltop, the enemy had superior numbers and better defensive positions. Your mission is to capture this position with minimal casualties, the simulation instructor announced. You have limited time and resources. Begin planning. Crix stepped forward immediately. We must approach this with honor. I propose we send a formal challenge to the enemy commander. If they accept single combat, we can resolve this without unnecessary bloodshed. Lyra nodded. That sounds reasonable. If they refuse, we could attempt to negotiate a peaceful solution. Jake looked at the tactical display more carefully. He studied the enemy positions, their supply lines, and the terrain around the hilltop. What if they don't want to fight fair? Jake asked. What if they just laugh at your challenge? Then, we must find another honorable solution, Crix said firmly. Jake scratched his head. But the mission is to capture the position. If they won't negotiate and they won't fight fair, what then? We could try to convince them to surrender, Lyra suggested. Perhaps offer them favorable terms. What if they say no to that too? His teammates looked at him with confusion. Then we would have to consider our options. Crix said. Jake studied the display again. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. We don't have to attack them directly. Look at their supply lines. They're getting food and water from that valley to the east. If we cut off their supplies, they'll have to surrender or come down and fight us on equal terms. That seems... Lyra paused. Indirect. It's called a siege, Jake said. Very common tactic. Much safer than trying to assault a fortified position. Crix looked uncomfortable. This would involve causing suffering to the enemy through hunger and thirst. Well, yeah, but it's temporary. They can surrender anytime they want. Nobody has to die. Jake's teammates exchanged glances. Finally, Lyra spoke up. I suppose it would result in fewer casualties than a direct assault. They implemented Jake's plan. The simulation showed their forces surrounding the enemy position and cutting off supply routes. Within 2 simulation days, the enemy surrendered. Without a fight. Excellent work, Team 7, the instructor announced. 0 casualties. Objective achieved. Jake grinned. That was easy. What's next? The next scenario involved a hostage rescue. Enemy forces had captured a group of civilians and were holding them in a building complex. The team had to extract the hostages without getting them killed. This calls for a careful approach, Crix said. We must respect the safety of the innocent. Agreed, Lyra said. Perhaps we could negotiate for their release. Jake studied the layout of the building complex. What do we know about the enemy? What do they want? They are demanding the release of political prisoners, the simulation instructor sighed. So they're motivated by politics, not money, Jake mused. That makes them harder to predict. Political fanatics are usually willing to die for their cause. His teammates looked at him strangely. How do you know that? Lyra asked. Basic human psychology, Jake said. People who are fighting for beliefs are more dangerous than people who are fighting for money or survival. Jake continued studying the tactical display. Here's what I'm thinking. We don't negotiate with them at all. Instead, we feed them false information to make them panic. False information? Crix asked. Sure. We let them intercept communications about a massive military force heading their way. Make them think they're about to be overwhelmed. When people panic, they make mistakes. That seems dishonest, Lyra said. It's called psychological warfare, Jake explained. Much safer than trying to storm the building. If they panic, they might surrender or make tactical errors that give us an advantage. What if they harm the hostages out of desperation? Crix asked. Jake shrugged. Then we go to Plan B, fast assault with maximum force. Get in and neutralize the threats before they can react. His teammates looked horrified. Neutralize? Lyra whispered. Yeah, take them out. Stun weapons, sleep gas, whatever works. The goal is to end the situation as quickly as possible. Jake implemented his psychological warfare plan. The simulation showed enemy forces receiving false intelligence about incoming reinforcements. Within hours, the enemy was in chaos. Half of them tried to flee, and the other half argued about what to do. Jake's team was able to rescue all the hostages during the confusion. Outstanding tactical thinking, Team 7, the instructor announced. Mission accomplished with 0 casualties. Jake's teammates were quiet as they left the simulation chamber. Finally, Crix spoke up. Your methods are effective, but they seem to rely on deception and manipulation. Sometimes that's the best way to solve problems, Jake said. Humans have learned that the most efficient solution is usually the one that avoids direct confrontation. But what about honor? Crix asked. What about fighting with courage and dignity? Jake thought about that. Honor is great, but it doesn't help if you're dead. My job is to complete the mission and bring my people home safely. Everything else is secondary. Lyra was walking beside them, listening to their conversation. Jake, can I ask you something? Sure. Do humans ever fight fairly? Do you ever engage in honorable combat? Jake considered that question. Define fair. If someone is trying to kill me, I'm going to use every advantage I can get. If that means better weapons, better tactics, or better intelligence, then that's what I'll use. But what if the enemy is weaker than you? Lyra asked. What if they don't have access to the same resources? Then they shouldn't pick a fight with me, Jake said. Look, I understand that other species have different ideas about warfare, but humans learned a long time ago that war isn't a game. It's not about proving how brave you are. It's about winning. So you can go home. The next scenario was more complex. 2 alien civilizations were fighting over a resource-rich planet. Each side had legitimate claims, and both were prepared to fight. The team's job was to resolve the conflict. This clearly calls for diplomatic mediation, Lyra said. We need to find a solution that satisfies both parties. Agreed, Crix said. Perhaps we can arrange a compromise where both sides share the resources. Jake studied the briefing materials. What if they don't want to share? What if both sides are convinced they deserve the entire planet? Then we must help them see reason, Lyra said. What if they're not reasonable? Jake asked. What if they're so committed to their positions that they'd rather fight than compromise? Then we must find another way, Crix said. Jake looked at the tactical information about both civilizations. Here's what I see. Side A has better technology, but smaller numbers. Side B has more ships, but older weapons. Neither side can win a direct fight without massive casualties. So we help them. Understand that, Lyra said. Or, Jake said, we make sure they both understand that fighting would be suicide for everyone involved. How do we do that? Crix asked. Jake grinned. We convince each side that the other has allies they don't know about. We make them think that any attack would trigger a much larger conflict. More deception, Lyra said quietly. More psychology. Jake corrected. People are less likely to fight when they think they'll lose badly. His teammates were reluctant, but they agreed to try Jake's approach. The simulation showed both alien civilizations receiving intelligence about hidden military alliances. Within days, both sides were requesting mediation talks. Brilliant work, Team 7, the instructor announced. Conflict resolved without any military action. As they left the simulation chamber, Jake noticed that other teams were struggling with their scenarios. Most of them were trying to find honorable solutions that satisfied everyone involved. Their approaches were taking much longer and often resulted in continued conflicts. Jake, Lyra said as they walked back to there. The next morning, Jake found himself sitting in a conference room with the Academy's senior leadership. Admiral Cretan, a large reptilian being with scars across his scaled face, sat at the head of the table. Commander Zethkar was there, along with Professor Quill and several other instructors Jake didn't recognize. Human Martinez, Admiral Cretan said in a deep, gravelly voice. We have spent the night reviewing your service records and your species' military files. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Is there a problem, sir? That depends on your perspective, the Admiral replied. We have discovered some interesting information about Earth's military capabilities and philosophy. Admiral Cretan activated a holographic display showing Jake's personnel file. According to these records, you are considered a moderate within your species' military structure. Yes, sir. I prefer diplomatic solutions when possible. Yet your tactical approaches in our simulations were more aggressive than anything we have seen from other species, Professor Quill said. If you are moderate, what would an aggressive human propose? Jake thought about his old drill instructors and some of the veterans he had served with. Well, sir, they would probably focus more on speed and overwhelming force. Less concern about enemy casualties, more emphasis on ending conflicts quickly. The alien officers exchanged glances. Admiral Cretan leaned forward. Human Martinez, we need you to be completely honest with us. Does your species have detailed military plans for fighting other galactic civilizations? Jake hesitated. That was classified information, but they seemed to already know the answer. Yes, sir. Earth's Strategic Command maintains contingency plans for various scenarios, including scenarios where humans fight against other galactic species. Yes, sir. It's standard military planning. You prepare for all possible threats, even unlikely ones. The room went quiet. Admiral Cretan's eyes were fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him nervous. Human Martinez, the Admiral said slowly, your species has been in contact with galactic civilization for less than 50 years. In that time, you have developed military plans for fighting every known alien species. It's just contingency. Planning, Jake said quickly. We hope we never have to use those plans. But military commanders need to be prepared for anything. What do these plans involve? Commander Zethkar asked. Jake shifted in his seat. I don't think I should discuss classified military information. We're not asking for specific details. Admiral Cretan said, we want to understand your species' general approach to hypothetical conflicts with other civilizations. Jake considered his words carefully. Earth's military doctrine focuses on rapid victory through technological and tactical superiority. The goal is to end any conflict as quickly as possible to minimize casualties on both sides. By any means. Necessary? Professor Quill asked. Within the bounds of international law and rules of engagement, Jake replied. But yes, the priority is winning quickly and decisively. Admiral Cretan activated another display showing comparative military data. According to our analysis, human military technology is approximately 50 years behind most galactic civilizations. Yet your strategic planning assumes you could defeat superior forces. How is this possible? Jake looked at the data on the screen. Technology isn't everything, sir. Tactics, strategy, and willingness to adapt can overcome technological disadvantages. Elaborate. Commander Zethkar said. Jake stood up and approached the display. Most alien military doctrines seem to focus on direct confrontation between similar forces. Honor-based combat, formal battle lines, that sort of thing. He pointed to different sections of the display. Humans would avoid that kind of fight. We'd use asymmetric warfare, target infrastructure, disrupt supply lines, and attack command structures. You would target civilian infrastructure? Professor Quill asked, her feathers ruffling. Military-related infrastructure, Jake clarified. Power plants that supply military bases, communication networks used by enemy forces, transportation hubs for military supplies. But civilians would be affected by these attacks, Admiral Cretan observed. Jake nodded. That's unavoidable in modern warfare. But the goal would be to make continued fighting impossible, not to harm civilians directly. The alien officers were quiet for a long minute. Finally, Admiral Cretan spoke again. Human Martinez, we have also reviewed your species' historical conflict data. According to our analysis, humans have been involved in continuous warfare for your entire recorded history. Not continuous, Jake protested. We've had periods of peace. Local periods, Commander Zethkar said. But somewhere on your planet, humans have been fighting other humans almost constantly for thousands of years. Jake thought about that. I guess that's true, but that's how we learned to be good at it. Good at it, Professor Quill repeated quietly. We had to be, Jake said. Species that aren't good at warfare don't survive. Natural selection applies to military capabilities, too. Admiral Cretan leaned back in his chair. Most galactic civilizations developed warfare as a last resort for extreme situations. Your species appears to have developed it as a primary tool for problem solving. That's not fair, Jake said. Humans prefer peace. We just understand that sometimes conflict is unavoidable. But you prepare for conflict as if it's inevitable, Commander Zethkar said. Because it often is, Jake replied. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's basic survival thinking. Admiral Cretan activated a new display showing comparative casualty data from various galactic conflicts. Human Martinez, in the past 1,000 years, most galactic wars have resulted in casualty rates below 1% of involved populations. Your species' recent conflicts show casualty rates of 5 to 15%. Jake studied the numbers. Those were world wars, involving entire civilizations. The stakes were survival of entire nations. And this justifies the higher casualty rates? It justifies doing whatever was necessary to win, Jake said. When your entire civilization is at stake, you can't worry about fighting fair. Professor. Quill stood up suddenly. This is exactly what terrifies us about your species. You treat massive casualties as acceptable if they serve your strategic goals. We treat them as tragic, but sometimes necessary, Jake corrected. No human wants war, but when war comes, we fight to win. Admiral Cretan was studying Jake with his large reptilian eyes. Human Martinez, are you aware that your species' approach to warfare is considered psychopathic by most galactic civilizations? Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Psychopathic? The casual acceptance of deception, the willingness to cause massive suffering, the treatment of war as a problem-solving tool, Commander Zethkar listed. Most species would consider these traits signs of mental illness. But we're not mentally ill, Jake protested. We're just practical. From your perspective, yes, Admiral Cretan said. From ours, your species appears to lack basic empathy and moral constraints when it comes to violence. Jake sat back down, feeling confused and hurt. Are you saying humans are evil? Not evil, Professor Quill said quietly. Dangerous, unpredictable, willing to do things that other species would never consider. Admiral Cretan leaned forward. Again, Human Martinez, we need to ask you a difficult question. If Earth came under attack from a hostile alien force, what would your species do? Jake thought about that. We'd fight back with everything we had. Everything? Yes, sir. Every weapon, every tactic, every resource. We'd fight until we won or until there was nothing left to fight with. Even if the enemy offered reasonable. Surrender terms? Depends on the terms. If they wanted to enslave us or destroy our civilization, we'd keep fighting. And if your resistance caused massive casualties on both sides? Jake met the Admiral's gaze. Then that would be the price. Of freedom. The room was completely silent. Jake could see shock and fear in the eyes of every alien in the room. Human Martinez, Admiral Cretan said finally, your species would rather die fighting than accept defeat. Most humans would, yes. We have a saying, give me liberty or give me death. Commander Zethkar's multiple eyes were all focused on Jake. This is why your species terrifies us. You would turn any conflict into a fight to the death. Only if the alternative was slavery or extinction, Jake said. We're not suicidal, but we won't surrender our freedom. Professor Quill was pacing around the room, her feathers agitated. This explains the historical data. Your species fights with the desperation of a cornered animal, even when the stakes don't warrant it. The stakes always warrant it, Jake said firmly. Freedom and dignity are worth fighting for. Admiral Cretan was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke in a voice that seemed very tired. Human Martinez, I need you to understand something. Your species has been in galactic society for less than 50 years. In that time, you have become the subject of more military concern than any other civilization in recorded history. Jake felt his stomach drop. What do you mean? Every major galactic power has developed contingency plans for dealing with humanity, Commander Zethkar said. Not because you have threatened anyone, but because your approach to warfare makes you unpredictable. Are you saying the galaxy is afraid of humans? Terrified would be more accurate, Professor Quill said. Your species represents an unknown variable in every strategic calcul. Jake spent the next week feeling like an outsider at the academy. Word had spread about the dangerous human, and most alien students avoided him completely. Even Lyra seemed nervous around him now. Jake ate his meals alone and attended classes where other students whispered and pointed. He was sitting by himself in the academy's observation deck, looking out at the stars, when an alarm began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights flashed red, and automated voices announced a security alert. Jake ran toward the command center, where he found chaos. Admiral Cretan was shouting orders while alien officers rushed around monitoring stations. What's happening? Jake asked Commander Zethkar. Unknown hostile force, the commander replied tersely. They appeared at the edge of the system without warning. 3 large ships, unknown configuration. Jake looked at the tactical display. The enemy ships were moving in a strange formation he didn't recognize. Are they responding to communications? No response to any frequency, Admiral Cretan said. They're jamming our long-range communications and moving toward the academy. Professor Quill approached with a worried expression. Their technology appears to be more advanced than anything in our databases. Our defensive systems may not be sufficient. Jake studied the enemy formation more carefully. Something about their movement pattern seemed familiar. Can you show me their approach vector and timing? Commander Zethkar activated a tracking display. Jake watched the enemy ship's movements for several minutes, noting their speed changes and course corrections. They're hurting you, Jake said suddenly. What? Admiral Cretan looked at him sharply. Look at their formation. They're not trying to attack directly. They're forcing your defensive ships into specific positions. Jake pointed to the display. See how they changed course when your patrol ships moved to intercept? They're pushing your forces exactly where they want them. To what purpose? Commander Zethkar asked. Jake studied the pattern more carefully. They want your ships clustered together in the inner system. That suggests they have some kind of area effect weapon. The alien officers exchanged worried glances. What do you recommend? Admiral Cretan asked. Jake was surprised by the question. You want my advice? You're the only one here who thinks like a predator, Professor Quill said quietly. Right now, we need that perspective. Jake turned back to the tactical display. First, you need to stop playing their game. Don't let them control where your forces go. He pointed to several positions on the screen. Spread your ships out. Make them commit to attacking one position or another. Right now, they can hit everything at once. But that would leave some areas undefended, Commander Zethkar protested. Better to lose part of your force than all of it, Jake said. Also, you need to find out what they really want. What do you mean? Admiral Cretan asked. Nobody attacks a military academy for fun. Either they want something here, or they want to send a message. Figure out which one. Jake studied the enemy ship's specifications. These ships are built for speed and stealth, not prolonged combat. They're not here to conquer the academy. They're here for a quick strike. A quick strike against what? Professor Quill asked. Jake looked around the command center. Information. The academy has military data from dozens of species. Maybe they want to steal it. Admiral Cretan was listening carefully. What would you do in their position? If I wanted data from the academy, I'd create a distraction to draw the defenders away, then send a small team to the data centers. The ship formation is the distraction. Jake pointed to a different section of the display. You should be watching for small craft or transport beams. The real attack is probably happening right now, while everyone is focused on the big ships. Admiral Cretan barked orders to his security teams. Within minutes, they reported unauthorized energy readings near the Academy's main computer core. How did you know? Commander Zethkar asked. It's what I would do, Jake said simply. When you can't win by force, you win by misdirection. The next few hours were tense. The Academy's security forces engaged small teams of intruders while the defensive fleet maneuvered to counter the enemy ships. Jake found himself serving as an unofficial tactical advisor, suggesting strategies that the alien officers hadn't considered. Their jamming has a weakness, Jake observed, studying the communication disruption patterns. It's designed to block standard galactic frequencies, but it might not affect quantum entanglement communications. We don't have quantum communications, Admiral Cretan said. But some of your patrol ships might have experimental systems, Jake suggested. It's worth checking. They found that 3 ships did have prototype quantum communicators. Jake helped coordinate a plan to use those ships to call for reinforcements while the jammers were still active. This is brilliant tactical thinking, Professor Quill said as they watched the plan unfold. How do you come up with these solutions so quickly? You learn to think like your enemy, Jake explained. Figure out what they want and how they plan to get it. Then you find ways to disrupt their plans. The turning point came when Jake noticed something unusual about the enemy's behavior. They are retreating, he announced. But they haven't completed their mission, Commander Zethkar said. Our security teams are still fighting intruders. Jake shook his head. Look at the timing. They've been here exactly 47 minutes. That's not random. What does it mean? Admiral Cretan asked. It means they got what they came for in the first 40 minutes. Everything since then has been cover for their escape. Jake's prediction proved correct. The enemy ships withdrew as suddenly as they had arrived, taking their infiltration teams with them. The Academy's defenders were left confused and frustrated. They took nothing valuable, the security chief reported. Some minor personnel files, basic tactical manuals. Nothing that would justify such a risky operation. Jake had a different theory. They weren't here for what they took. They were here for what they learned. Explain, Admiral Cretan said. They wanted to see how galactic military forces respond to an unknown threat. Now they know your communication protocols, your defensive strategies, and your decision-making processes. The alien officers looked troubled. You're saying this was a test? I'm saying this was reconnaissance, Jake corrected. Someone is gathering intelligence about galactic military capabilities. In the days following the attack, Jake found that his status at the Academy had changed dramatically. Instead of avoiding him, alien students now sought him out for his insights on military strategy. His tactical advice during the crisis had earned him respect, even from those who had been afraid of him. Lyra approached him during lunch one afternoon. Jake, I owe you an apology. For what? For being afraid of you. I thought humans were dangerous. Because you approach warfare differently than other species. Jake nodded. We are dangerous. That part wasn't wrong. But you used that danger to protect us, Lyra said. When the Academy was threatened, your human way of thinking saved lives. It's just a different perspective, Jake said. Every species has something valuable to contribute. Commander Zethkar joined their conversation. Human Martinez, the Academy leadership, has made a decision. We would like to offer you a permanent position as an instructor. Jake was surprised. Teaching what? Asymmetric warfare tactics, Commander Zethkar replied. Your species' approach to military strategy, properly understood, could help other civilizations defend themselves against unconventional threats. You want me to teach aliens how to think like humans? We want you to teach them how to think. Like survivors, Professor Quill said, approaching their table. Your species has learned lessons about warfare that others need to understand. Jake considered the offer. What about the fear? What about other species being worried about human military capabilities? Admiral Cretan sat down at their table. That fear still exists, Human Martinez. But the recent attack has shown us something important. There are threats in the galaxy that require unconventional responses. And humans are good at unconventional responses, Jake said. Humans are the best at unconventional responses, the Admiral corrected. Your species' willingness to do whatever is necessary to survive is exactly what other civilizations need to learn. Jake looked around the table at his alien colleagues. Are you sure about this? Teaching human military tactics to other species could make the galaxy more dangerous. Or it could make the galaxy more prepared for dangerous threats, Commander Zethkar said. The choice is whether to fear human capabilities or learn from them. Professor Quill leaned forward. Jake, your species approaches warfare with a combination of creativity, pragmatism, and determination that no other civilization has developed. These traits could help others survive threats they couldn't handle alone. What if I teach them too well? Jake asked. What if other species become as dangerous as humans? Admiral Cretan was quiet for a moment. Then perhaps the galaxy will. Be safer, because everyone will understand the true cost of warfare. Jake thought about his experiences at the Academy. He had started as an outsider, feared and misunderstood. But the crisis had shown that human military thinking had value beyond just winning fights. I'll do it, Jake said finally. But I have one condition. What condition? Admiral Creedon asked. I teach the complete human.